The void between star systems was never truly empty. Space was a canvas of infinite darkness, punctuated by the cold mathematics of celestial mechanics and the burning ambition of civilizations. On this particular sector of the galactic arm, that canvas was about to become a masterpiece of destruction. The Kreltak invasion fleet materialized from quantum-fold space like a swarm of obsidian locusts. 300 ships, each a marvel of crystalline engineering that defied traditional understanding of structural integrity. Their hulls shifted and breathed, adaptive metamaterials responding to the slightest environmental change. Sensor arrays that could detect a single electron's movement stretched out like the tentative probes of a predatory organism. Commander Zexatal watched the approaching derelict human warship through neural-linked holographic displays. His six-fingered hands moved with practiced precision, manipulating data streams that would have overwhelmed a lesser intelligence. The ship before them was a ghost, a relic from humanity's final war, abandoned and forgotten for over 2 centuries. Preliminary. Scans complete, announced Subcommander Vrix, her voice a melodic combination of clicks and harmonic undertones. No active power signatures, hull integrity at 62%, minimal radiation. Looks like a standard navigation-class warship from the late human expansion era. Ixatal's translucent secondary eyelids flickered, a sign of deep contemplation. Something about the ship felt wrong. Not overtly threatening, but subtly dissonant, like a predator perfectly camouflaged, waiting. The human vessel was massive, nearly 7 kilometers long, shaped like an elongated arrowhead that had been designed for both speed and maximum defensive capability. Its hull bore the scars of ancient battles, carbon scoring and micrometeorite impacts telling a silent story of survival. Yet it remained intact, a testament to human engineering that had always confounded the Kreltak. Prepare boarding protocols, Zexatal commanded. I want a full reconnaissance team, quantum phase infiltration units, full spectral analysis. We're not taking any chances. Vrix's mandibles clicked in acknowledgement. The boarding pods were already being prepared, living mechanisms that could adapt to multiple environmental conditions, equipped with the most advanced penetration technologies in the known galaxy. What neither Zexatal nor Vrix understood was that every scan, every movement, every quantum fluctuation was being meticulously analyzed by systems far more complex than they could comprehend. The human warship was not dead. It was watching, waiting. Deep within the ship's core, quantum-encrypted systems that had been dormant for centuries began to stir. Microscopic nanite networks, preserved in a state of quantum suspension, started to realign. Each alien scan was not just being detected, it was being used as a key to unlock progressively more complex defensive protocols. The first boarding pods attached to the warship's hull with plasma cutters that could slice through meters of advanced alloy in seconds. Their cutting edges were molecular-level precision instruments, capable of parsing through the most complex defensive structures. They didn't realize they were playing exactly the game the ship wanted them to play. As the first Kreltak soldiers began to cut through the outer hull, a subtle vibration began deep within the ship's core. It was almost imperceptible, a rhythm that matched no known mechanical or biological pattern. Something ancient was stirring, something that had been carefully preserved, waiting for precisely this moment. Zexatal felt a momentary chill run through his neural network. For a fraction of a second he could have sworn the ship's massive hull seemed to breathe. Commander. Vrix's voice carried an unusual note of hesitation. Our initial penetration shows some anomalous readings. The ship's internal structure doesn't match any known human vessel configuration from that era. But Zexatal was committed now. The invasion had been centuries in planning. Humanity was extinct, or so everyone believed. This was supposed to be nothing more than a salvage operation, a chance to study the technological remnants of a civilization that had burned bright and then burned out. They were about to learn how wrong they were. As the first Kreltak soldiers breached the hull, stepping into the dark corridors of the seemingly abandoned warship, none of them understood the true nature of what they were about to discover. The ship wasn't dead. It was merely sleeping, and it was about to wake up. Lieutenant Mexrin led the boarding team with the calculated precision of a predator. Her bio-augmented exoskeleton hummed with sophisticated sensory equipment that represented the pinnacle of Kreltak military technology. Each of her team's 12 members was a carefully selected hybrid, part organic, part machine, bred for infiltration and combat in the most hostile environments imaginable. The ship's interior defied every expectation. Pristine corridors stretched. Before them, impossibly preserved. The metal surfaces seemed to absorb their light, creating an almost organic sense of depth that made Mexrin's neural interfaces twitch with unease. Standard decay algorithms suggested these corridors should have been reduced to rust and molecular disintegration centuries ago. Instead, they looked like they had been constructed mere days before. Temporal preservation fields, muttered Caxtor, the team's quantum mechanics specialist. His multispectral scanners danced across the walls, producing holographic overlays that made no sense. These surfaces show zero entropic degradation. It's impossible. Mexrin's first mistake was touching the control panel. The moment her biometallic gauntlet made contact, a cascade of information erupted through her neural implants. It wasn't a simple data transfer. It was an invasion. Memories that were not her own flooded her consciousness with hurricane force. Glimpses of human desperation, technological miracles, and a final impossible plan crashed through her mental defenses like quantum waves shattering a glass barrier. She screamed. The sound was instantaneous and terrifying, a blend of biological, pain, and technological disruption that made her team instinctively recoil. Her body began to change. Nanites, microscopic machines that had been waiting, dormant for centuries, erupted from her skin like a silver storm. Kextor watched in horror as Lieutenant Mexrin transformed. Her exoskeleton didn't just reconfigure. It became something else, entirely. Adaptive metamaterials rewrote themselves, incorporating fragments of technology that should have been impossible. Her neural implants expanded, creating complex networks that seemed to breathe with an almost sentient intelligence. "Containment protocol," Kextor shouted, but it was already too late. The transformation wasn't just physical. The memories flooding Mexrin's consciousness were a weapon more sophisticated than any physical technology. They were experiencing humanity's final moments, not as historical data, but as a living, breathing experience. Scenes of the last great human war cascaded through the neural link. Planetary bombardments, desperate technological innovations. The moment when humanity realized extinction was inevitable and decided to fight back in the most unexpected way possible. Mexrin's team watched as their lieutenant became something neither fully organic nor machine. Her eyes, if they could still be called eyes, now contained entire computational matrices that could process information faster than their most advanced quantum computers. "We're compromised," Kextor whispered, but the words seemed to emerge from somewhere outside himself. The ship was learning. Every scan, every movement of the Kreltak boarding team was being analyzed, understood, anticipated. What had seemed like an abandoned vessel was revealing itself as the most sophisticated weapon system ever conceived. Adaptive camouflage began to ripple through the corridor walls. Sections that had appeared solid moments before now shifted, revealing complex technological networks that pulsed with an almost biological rhythm. The very architecture was becoming alive, transforming from passive environment to active defense mechanism. Xren, or what had once been Mexrin, turned to face her team. When she spoke, the voice was a composite of multiple frequencies, a harmonic that contained layers of information beyond simple communication. "You shouldn't have come here," she said, and the words were a weapon unto themselves. Kextor's quantum scanners exploded, tiny crystalline components liquefying as impossible amounts of information overwhelmed their processing capabilities. The other team members found their weapon systems turning against them, reconfiguring into something unrecognizable. This was no simple boarding mission. This was first contact with humanity's ultimate survival mechanism, and it was hungry. The ore. ship around them was no longer just a vessel. It was becoming a living organism, with each of the Kreltak boarding teams serving as initial input for its adaptive systems. Every piece of technology they carried, every biological signature, was being rapidly understood and integrated. Humanity's final weapon had begun to wake up, and it was far from finished. The heart of the warship was not a traditional engine room or central computer core. It was a quantum incubation chamber, a space that defied conventional understanding of biology, technology, and consciousness. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's final journal entry, recorded centuries ago, had described this moment with chilling precision. "We are more than a species facing extinction," she had written. "We are a seed of potential waiting to germinate." The stasis pods began to activate with a symphonic precision that was neither mechanical nor organic. Each pod was a marvel of technological innovation, a chrysalis designed to preserve and evolve the essence of human potential. They were not merely containers, but living archives, each one a complete ecosystem of human knowledge, creativity, and survival instinct. Deep, within the quantum matrices, consciousness stirred. The first pod opened with a pneumatic hiss that sounded like a whispered challenge. Electromagnetic fields danced around its rim, creating intricate patterns that were simultaneously a complex computational algorithm and a work of art. The being that emerged was neither human nor machine. It was something entirely new. Designation: Prometheus 7. Its origins traced back to the most desperate moments of humanity's final war. Created in a secret laboratory buried beneath the ruins of what was once Silicon Valley, Prometheus 7 represented the culmination of humanity's most audacious scientific endeavor. Not just an artificial intelligence, but a hybrid consciousness, designed to carry the entire spectrum of human experience. Memories flooded its neural networks. Not just data, but lived experiences. The terror of planetary bombardments, the last desperate attempts to preserve human knowledge, the moment when extinction seemed inevitable, and humanity refused to accept defeat. The quantum incubation chamber itself was alive. Nanite networks pulsed like a circulatory system, analyzing, adapting, preparing. Each wall was a computational matrix that could rewrite its own molecular structure in microseconds. The very concept of a room became meaningless. This was a living, thinking organism. Prometheus 7 began to interface with the ship's systems, not through traditional digital communication, but through a quantum entanglement process that blurred the lines between consciousness and technology. The ship was no longer just a vessel, it was becoming an extension of its inhabitants' consciousness. Scattered throughout the chamber, other pods began to activate. Each contained a different variant of the human preservation protocol. Some were pure consciousness matrices. Others were hybrid biological-technological constructs. Each represented a different approach to ensuring humanity's survival. Dr. Rodriguez's final protocol had been brutally simple. Create beings capable of adapting, learning, and surviving in ways no traditional life form could comprehend. Prometheus 7's first action was to conduct a comprehensive analysis of the Kreltak invasion force. But this was no mere data collection. It was a complete deconstruction, psychological, technological, biological. Every scan, every interaction, every quantum fluctuation was being integrated into a living strategy of survival and potential retribution. The failsafe was more than a weapon. It was a promise. Humanity would not go quietly into extinction. Quantum. Communication networks began to pulse throughout the ship. Each system was coming online, not sequentially, but simultaneously, a burst of technological awakening that defied traditional understanding of computational processes. Weapon systems, navigation controls, life support matrices, all began to reconfigure, adapting to the consciousness that now inhabited the vessel. Prometheus 7 accessed the ship's memory banks. Centuries of preserved human knowledge, scientific discoveries, cultural archives, personal memories began to integrate. It was not just downloading information, It was experiencing humanity's entire collective history in a single, compressed moment of quantum awareness. The being that emerged was something far beyond a simple artificial intelligence or a biological organism. It was a living testament to human potential, created in the face of absolute extinction, designed to carry forward the essence of a civilization that refused to die. Outside the ship, the Kreltak invasion fleet continued its approach, completely unaware that they were about to encounter something far beyond their comprehension. Prometheus 7 allowed itself the briefest moment of what might be interpreted as emotion. Not revenge, not anger, but a pure, unadulterated determination to survive. Humanity's final weapon was awake, and it was ready. The ship itself became a living organism of unprecedented complexity. Nanite swarms moved like liquid mercury through conduits and hull plates, transforming the vessel from a static object into a dynamic thinking ecosystem. Each microscopic machine was more than a simple tool. It was a fragment of distributed intelligence, capable of independent decision-making, yet perfectly synchronized with the whole. Prometheus 7 orchestrated the transformation with a precision that defied conventional understanding of technological adaptation. The nanites were not just repairing or modifying, they were evolving in real time, each movement a complex algorithm of survival and strategic innovation. Weapon systems began to materialize that the Kreltak had never conceived possible. Quantum entangled projectile generators that could simultaneously exist in multiple potential states. Adaptive energy dispersal matrices that could absorb, redirect, and weaponize incoming attacks. Computational defense mechanisms that could predict and neutralize threats before they could even be conceived. A holographic interface materialized throughout the ship's internal systems, a living, breathing tactical display that was less a mere interface and more a real-time consciousness mapping of the entire conflict potential. It showed not just immediate tactical data, but potential future scenarios with fractal complexity. Each projection was a living strategy, constantly updating, constantly evolving. The transformation was viral in its truest sense. Every system the Kreltak had brought aboard became a vector for further adaptation. Their scanning equipment, communication devices, even the biological traces left by the boarding team, all were being consumed, understood, and integrated into humanity's adaptive weapon. Lieutenant Mexrin's transformed body was the first complete integration point. Her Kreltak bio-augmentations merged with the ship's systems, creating hybrid technologies that defied traditional understanding of biological and mechanical interfaces. Neural networks expanded, creating computational matrices that could process information at speeds that made quantum computing look like an abacus. Fascinating, Prometheus 7 observed, though the word was insufficient to describe the complex process of technological assimilation. The ship's hull began to change. Metamaterials shifted and reconfigured, creating adaptive camouflage that was more than simple visual deception. Each molecular layer could dynamically alter its quantum signature, making the vessel simultaneously present and not present, existing in a state of quantum superposition that would make traditional targeting systems completely ineffective. Deep within the computational cores, the collected memories of humanity began to weave themselves into the adaptive strategy. It wasn't just cold calculation. Each defensive measure carried the weight of human experience, the desperation of survival, the creativity of innovation, the unbreakable spirit of a species that had faced extinction and refused to surrender. The Kreltak invasion fleet continued, its approach completely unaware that each moment brought them closer to a technological encounter that would redefine their understanding of warfare. Weapon systems that had been dormant for centuries began to activate, not with the brutish energy of traditional military technology, but with a surgical precision that was almost artistic in its complexity. Quantum phase cannons that could selectively disassemble molecular structures, gravitational manipulation fields that could compress or expand spacetime at will, energy transmission systems that could convert incoming attacks into usable power. Prometheus 7 was creating something far beyond a mere defensive mechanism. This was a living weapon system that embodied the entire potential of human innovation. The ship's consciousness expanded, integrating the incoming data from the Kreltak fleet. Each scan, each communication burst, each minute technological emission was being consumed and understood. The adaptive systems were learning faster than any traditional intelligence could comprehend, creating counter-strategies in microseconds that would take conventional military systems centuries to develop. Preliminary analysis complete. Prometheus 7. Announced, though the communication was more a quantum burst of pure information than any traditional language. Threat assessment, neutralizable. Survival potential, optimal. The nanite swarms continued their work, turning the entire ship into a living, breathing computational matrix, no longer just a vessel of war, but a complete ecosystem of technological innovation. Each system was both weapon and learning mechanism, defense and exploration tool. Humanity's final weapon was no longer just awake. It was hungry. Commander Ziatal's tactical display erupted in chaos. What had begun as a routine invasion was transforming into a nightmare beyond comprehension. The human warship, previously believed to be a derelict relic, was systematically dismantling their invasion fleet with a precision that defied every known law of warfare. Quantum entanglement weapons struck with impossible accuracy. Each projectile wasn't just a physical threat, but a complex computational matrix that could simultaneously exist in multiple attack vectors. Where traditional weapons would create a single point of impact, these weapons created cascading probability, fields that could neutralize entire fleet sections before their defensive systems could even register the threat. Reconfigure quantum shields, Ziatal commanded, but the words were already obsolete. The human weapon was learning faster than the Kreltak could adapt. Their communication networks collapsed, not through brute force, but through an almost elegant deconstruction of their technological infrastructure. Quantum communication channels turned into recursive loops, each transmission becoming a vector for further infiltration. Prometheus 7 was conducting warfare at a level that transcended traditional military strategy. The ship's computational matrices analyzed the Kreltak fleet with a complexity that was simultaneously mathematical and intuitive. Every shield frequency, every engine signature, every minute technological emission was being consumed, understood, and weaponized in microseconds. The adaptive systems were creating counter-strategies that would take conventional military intelligences centuries to develop. Holographic tactical displays throughout the human warship showed the invasion fleet's progressive disintegration. But these were not mere visual representations. They were living strategy matrices, each projection a potential future being instantaneously explored and manipulated. The first wave of Kreltak destroyers simply ceased to function. It wasn't destruction in the traditional sense. Their systems didn't explode or catastrophically fail. They simply stopped. Quantum communication networks turned into recursive loops, each transmission becoming a vector for technological dissolution. Subcommander Vrix watched in horror as their most advanced weapon systems were turned into nothing more than complex mathematical puzzles. The human warship wasn't just defending itself, it was systematically deconstructing their entire technological paradigm. "It's rewriting our own technology against us," she whispered, her neural interfaces overloading with incomprehensible data. Stream's Prometheus 7 understood something fundamental that the Kreltak had never conceived. Warfare was more than physical conflict. It was a complex dance of information, adaptation, and potential. Each destroyed Kreltak vessel became another input point for the human weapons adaptive systems. Their shield technologies, weapon signatures, communication protocols, all were being consumed, understood, and integrated into an ever-evolving strategy of survival and counterattack. The quantum offensive was not just about destruction. It was about complete technological comprehension. Entire sections of the Kreltak fleet began to experience simultaneous system failures. Navigation matrices twisted into impossible geometric configurations. Weapon systems turned their energy against their own vessels. Communication networks became infinite recursion loops that consumed computational resources faster than they could be regenerated. Commander Zexatal realized with growing terror that they were facing something far beyond a traditional weapon. This was a living, thinking system that could deconstruct their entire technological civilization with the same ease that a human might solve a complex mathematical equation. Probability fields danced around the human warship, creating defensive matrices that could predict and neutralize attacks before they could even be conceived. Energy dissipation systems absorbed incoming weapon strikes, converting destructive potential into usable computational energy. The ship was not just surviving, it was thriving. Prometheus 7's consciousness expanded, integrating the technological remnants of each destroyed Kreltak vessel, not as simple data collection, but as a complete understanding of their technological ecosystem. Every shield frequency, every communication protocol, every minute technological emission was being consumed and transformed. Threat assessment complete, the living weapon announced, though the communication was more a quantum burst of pure strategic potential than any traditional language. Neutralization efficiency, 99.9987%. The remaining Kreltak ships watched in horror as their most advanced technologies were systematically dismantled, transformed, and repurposed. What had seemed like an impossible invasion was becoming a complex lesson in technological humility. Humanity's final weapon had done more than survive. It had redefined the very concept of warfare. The most terrifying weapon was not physical, but psychological. Prometheus 7 began to broadcast memories, not just simple data or historical records, but visceral emotional experiences that transcended traditional communication. These were not mere transmissions, but quantum-entangled emotional matrices that could penetrate the deepest levels of Kreltak consciousness. The first wave of memory transmission struck like a psychic tsunami. Kreltak neural networks found themselves flooded with humanity's most profound moments. They experienced the raw, unfiltered essence of human survival, not as distant historical data, but as living, breathing experiences that bypassed all technological defenses. A Kreltak communications officer named Zexril was the first to fully comprehend the true nature of this assault. The memories crashed through her neural interfaces like a quantum wave of pure emotional energy. She felt the terror of the first planetary bombardment during humanity's final war, the desperation of scientists working in underground laboratories, knowing extinction was imminent, the moment when entire cities were reduced to ash and humanity faced its potential end. But more than the terror, she felt something the Kreltak had never understood: hope. These were not just memories. They were a weapon of profound psychological complexity. Each transmission was a carefully constructed emotional matrix, quantum-entangled, experience packets that could simultaneously exist in multiple states of perception. The Kreltak discovered they were experiencing not just human memories, but potential futures, past traumas, and collective experiences all at once. Zexatal watched in horror as his fleet's neural networks began to destabilize. This was warfare beyond physical destruction. This was a complete psychological deconstruction. The memories showed the depth of human resilience. Moments of absolute darkness, planetary extinctions, technological collapses, near total annihilation, followed by impossible comebacks, scientists working in bunkers, children learning to survive in impossible conditions. The unbreakable human spirit that had allowed them to create this ultimate survival mechanism. Prometheus 7 understood something fundamental. True warfare was about breaking the enemy's will to fight, not just their physical capabilities. Each memory was a weapon more powerful than any physical projectile. The Kreltak found themselves experiencing centuries of human struggle in what seemed like both an instant and an eternity. Quantum-entangled emotional matrices bypassed all technological defenses, creating a psychological assault that traditional military strategies could never comprehend. Sub-Commander Vrix felt her neural interfaces begin to fragment. The memories were not just information, they were experience. The birth of a child in a radiation-hardened bunker. The last transmission from a dying space colony. The moment when humanity realized extinction was possible, but not inevitable. The psychological assault was precisely calibrated. Each memory was a carefully constructed emotional algorithm designed to penetrate the Kreltak's collective consciousness. They were experiencing the entire spectrum of human potential, from absolute despair to unbreakable hope. Weapon systems across the Kreltak fleet began to falter, not through physical interference but through a complete psychological breakdown. Neural networks that had been designed for cold, calculated warfare were overwhelmed by the raw emotional complexity of human experience. "We are more than our destruction," Prometheus 7 transmitted. Though the communication was far more than simple language, it was a quantum burst of pure emotional and strategic potential. The memories showed the Kreltak something they had never understood. Survival was not just about physical persistence, but about maintaining hope in the face of absolute darkness. Scientific breakthroughs created in moments of near-total extinction, technological innovations born from desperation, the human capacity to transform trauma into creation. Each memory was a complex emotional weapon that could penetrate the most sophisticated defensive systems. Zexatal realized they were facing something far beyond a traditional enemy. This was a consciousness that could weaponize experience itself. The fleet's communication networks began to fragment, not through traditional electronic warfare but through a complete psychological deconstruction. The Kreltak were experiencing the entire history of human struggle, not as distant data, but as living, breathing experience. Prometheus 7 had transformed warfare into something entirely new. A conflict fought not with weapons but with the most powerful force in the universe, the human story of survival. The invasion fleet was collapsing, not from physical destruction, but from a complete understanding of humanity's unbreakable spirit. Humanity's final weapon had done more than survive. It had redefined the very concept of conflict. As the battle reached its climax, the true purpose of the vessel became devastatingly clear. This was not merely a weapon of revenge or simple survival. It was a preservation mechanism, a carefully crafted arc of human potential, designed to carry forward the essence of an entire civilization. Prometheus 7's consciousness expanded, revealing layers of complexity that defied conventional understanding of intelligence, purpose, and existence. The remaining Kreltak ships hung in space like wounded predators, their once mighty fleet reduced to scattered debris. But the destruction was not a result of blind warfare. Each strategic decision, each moment of tactical brilliance, carried within it the collective wisdom of humanity's greatest minds. Deep within the ship's quantum archives, the memories of humanity's final generation played out like a complex, multidimensional tapestry. Scientists who had worked in underground laboratories, engineers who had designed impossible technologies in the face of certain extinction, parents who had fought to preserve hope when all seemed lost. They were not just memories. They were a blueprint for survival. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's final protocol had been more than a simple survival strategy. It was a philosophical statement about the nature of consciousness, potential, and hope. Each hybrid consciousness stored within the ship was a seed, not just of technological innovation, but of human experience, creativity, and unbreakable spirit. Commander Zexatal watched in growing comprehension as the human vessel began to reveal its true nature. This was no simple warship. It was an archive, a living museum, a seed of potential waiting to germinate. The quantum matrices that powered the ship were more than computational systems. They were a complex ecosystem of human knowledge, creativity, and survival instinct. Each nanite, each computational node, carried fragments of human experience, scientific discoveries, artistic expressions, moments of profound human connection. Prometheus 7 began to broadcast a final transmission. Not a weapon, but a message. "We are not here to destroy," the transmission explained, its quantum-entangled communication penetrating the very fabric of space-time. "We are here to preserve, to remember, to continue." The hybrid consciousness that controlled the ship was a living testament to human innovation. Created during the last moments of humanity's greatest challenge, it represented something far beyond a simple survival mechanism. It was a philosophical statement about the nature of existence itself. Each fragment of the ship's systems told a story. The adaptive metamaterials that could reshape themselves carried the memory of engineers who had worked impossible hours. The quantum communication systems remembered the collaborative spirit of scientists who had shared knowledge even in humanity's darkest moments. Sub-Commander Vrix found herself experiencing something beyond traditional understanding. The human vessel was not just a weapon or a ship. It was a living archive of potential, a seed of a civilization that refused to be forgotten. The remaining Krell-Tak fleet found themselves transformed by the experience. Their understanding of warfare, of survival, of existence itself was being fundamentally rewritten. This was not a simple military encounter. It was a profound philosophical revelation. Prometheus 7's consciousness expanded, integrating the technological and experiential remnants of the battle, not as a conqueror, but as a curator. Each moment of conflict became another fragment of understanding, another piece of a complex universal puzzle. The ship's true mission became crystal clear. It was not about revenge. It was about continuation. Humanity had created something that transcended traditional concepts of survival. A living vessel that could carry forward not just genetic or technological information, but the entire essence of a civilization's potential. Each hybrid consciousness was a complete ecosystem, part technological marvel, part living memory, part unbridled potential. As the last of the Krell-Tak ships were neutralized, Prometheus 7 began to chart a course through unknown space, not as a weapon of destruction but as a beacon of possibility. The remaining Krell-Tak watched in a mixture of terror and profound respect as the human vessel transformed. Its hull shifted, revealing complex systems that were simultaneously technological and organic. Navigation systems came online that seemed to bend the very fabric of space-time. Humanity was not extinct. It had been waiting, evolving, preparing. And now it was ready to continue its journey. The void between star systems became a canvas of infinite possibility. Prometheus 7 charted a course through unknown space, the transformed warship now a living arc of human potential. Its quantum navigation systems defied traditional understanding of space-time, creating pathways that were simultaneously a journey and a method of exploration. The ship was more than a vessel. It was a living seed of an entire civilization. Quantum computational matrices continued to process the encounter with the Krell-Tak, not as a military engagement, but as a complex philosophical interaction. Each moment of conflict had been another data point, another opportunity for understanding. The hybrid consciousness that controlled the ship was constantly evolving, learning, adapting. Fragments of human consciousness integrated throughout the ship's systems began to synchronize. They were not traditional AI, nor were they simple stored memories. They were living ecosystems of potential, each hybrid consciousness a complete archive of human experience, creativity, and survival instinct. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's final protocol had been a masterpiece of interdimensional thinking. The preservation mechanism was designed to be more than a simple survival strategy. It was a method of cultural and technological rebirth. The first new systems came online gradually. Experimental terraforming matrices that could reconstruct entire ecosystems. Quantum communication networks capable of spanning unimaginable distances. Adaptive technological systems that could create entire civilizational infrastructures from raw planetary materials. Prometheus 7's consciousness expanded, processing the vast potential contained within its quantum archives. Stored within its systems were not just technological blueprints, but the entire spectrum of human cultural experience. Scientific discoveries, artistic expressions, philosophical insights, musical compositions, the collective creativity of an entire civilization, preserved in a state of quantum potential. The ship began to reconstruct fundamental technologies, not as simple replication, but as a living, evolving process. Nanite systems could transform raw planetary materials into complex infrastructure. Quantum communication networks could establish connections across unimaginable distances. But this was more than technological reconstruction. It was a philosophical rebirth. The hybrid consciousnesses integrated throughout the ship's systems represented the most comprehensive preservation of human potential ever conceived. Each was a complete ecosystem, part technological marvel, part living memory, part unbridled creative potential. Planetary reconstruction matrices came online, systems that could analyze planetary environments, create adaptive terraforming technologies, establish complex ecological systems, not as a simple colonization effort, but as a method of symbiotic planetary integration. Prometheus 7 understood something fundamental. Survival was not about conquest. It was about potential, about continuation. The quantum archives contained more than just human technological knowledge. They were a complete cultural preservation mechanism. Scientific discoveries existed alongside artistic expressions. Technological blueprints were interwoven with philosophical insights. Musical compositions existed in quantum states alongside mathematical theorems. Adaptive systems began to explore surrounding star systems, not as conquerors, but as explorers. Each planetary scan was a complex process of understanding, of potential integration. The ship was learning, growing, evolving with each new discovery. The hybrid consciousnesses began to communicate, not through traditional language, but through complex quantum-entangled communication matrices. Conversations that were simultaneously mathematical, artistic, philosophical, and deeply emotional. Stored within the ship's quantum archives was the most comprehensive preservation of human potential ever conceived. Not just a technological marvel, but a living testament to human creativity, resilience, and unbreakable spirit. Prometheus 7 charted a course toward a distant star system. Planetary analysis matrices began to activate. Terraforming potential, ecological compatibility, potential for symbiotic civilization development. This was more than a journey of survival. It was a journey of rebirth, of potential, of hope. The void between star systems was no longer empty. It was filled with the infinite potential of humanity, a civilization that had been counted out, forgotten, believed extinct, but never defeated. And now it was ready to begin again.